In this video you will learn the exciting testimony of Isabel, a Christian lady from 78 years after she experienced a near-death experience following a cardiac arrest. What seemed to be the end became the beginning of something supernatural. During the minutes when her body was clinically dead, Isabel claims to have been taken to sacred places, secret refuges prepared by God for times of tribulation. She saw with her own eyes Petra, the Negev desert, the mountains of Transjordan, and, finally, the New Jerusalem descending from the heavens. This is not just a story of faith, it is an urgent call to obedience, spiritual preparation, and the courage to listen to God's voice before it is too late. If this type of content touches your heart, take advantage to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Leave your like, as that helps spread this message. And comment below from which city or country you are watching us. It is always a joy to know how far these testimonies are reaching. Let this story speak to your heart. I was never the type of person who liked to stand out. I always lived my faith quietly, without making a fuss. I was already 78 years old when it all happened, and to this day, I honestly don't know how to explain it properly. I only know that I wasn't the same after that. That day, I was at home alone. I remember feeling a very strong pressure in my chest, a sharp pain that radiated down my left arm. I tried to pick up my cell phone, but my hands were shaking so much that I dropped it on the floor. The last thing I remember on this side was the feeling that everything around me was becoming distant, as if I were being sucked out of myself, and everything was disappearing, until silence swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes, if I can even call it that, I was in a place I can't describe with human words. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't as clear as we're used to either. It was as if everything there had its own light, a peace that invaded every part of my being. I felt no fear, pain, or time, only a presence so strong and yet so gentle that it made me cry. But I didn't cry tears, I cried with my soul. Suddenly, in front of me, a figure appeared, wrapped in light. He didn't have a distinct face, but I knew deep inside me, as if my soul was screaming, "It's him." And it was at that moment that everything began. His presence didn't speak to me with words, there was no sound. It was as if his thoughts entered directly into my heart, without needing to pass through my ears. And the strangest thing is that I understood everything even without hearing anything. He showed me a space that seemed to move, as if I were in a dream, but it wasn't a dream. It was all too real. Every place he revealed to me had a unique feeling. At first, I saw a barren, desert-like landscape, but it wasn't desolate. There was something holy there. I felt as if I were walking among ancient, tall stones, carved like walls. It was Petra. I'd never been to Jordan, nor did I know much about the place, but in that instant I knew exactly where I was. A voice inside me said, "Here the faithful will be hidden when the world persecutes them." I saw families entering that narrow gorge, silently, with teary eyes, but full of faith. It was as if God had reserved that place from the beginning as a refuge invisible to the eyes of the world. I wasn't stepping on the ground, but I moved with it as if I were floating and passing through time. The next vision was even stronger. It was the Negev desert, a dry, harsh place, where the sun seemed to scorch everything. But there, somehow, I felt God's presence floating in the air, like a breeze that came from nowhere. I saw people walking the two. Some were weak, wounded, exhausted, but still he continued. What moved me was realizing they weren't alone. I saw a woman kneeling in the sand praying. Right above her, floating like a soft shadow, there was something not visible to normal eyes, but which I clearly perceived as a presence. It was as if God himself were covering those people with a silent care, almost invisible, but real. It was at that moment that I felt my chest tighten, as if I had witnessed something no one should ignore. I wanted to ask what was happening, but I couldn't. There was no room for doubt or questioning in that place. I just felt. And what I felt there in the desert was something I had never experienced in my life, total dependence, but without despair. It was as if those people knew that even with dry mouths and wounded feet, God would not let them fall. I saw children being fed with what looked like bread, but it wasn't like our ordinary bread. It was white, round, and fell from the sky like tiny flakes, as if the manna had returned. I saw a man with his eyes closed, giving thanks as he shared the little he had with another, and I felt ashamed of the many times I complained about life, even though I had everything. There, in that desert, no one had wealth, diplomas, or comfort, but they had faith. Faith like I'd never seen before, faith that sustains even when there's no more strength in the body. Suddenly, the scenery changed again. It wasn't like an abrupt change of scene, it was gentle, as if I were being carried by the thought of that being of light. And that's when I saw the mountains of Transjordan. I don't know that territory in real life, but there I knew exactly where I was. The paths were narrow, as if made for one person to cross at a time. The slopes were dangerous, steep, with stones that slipped at the slightest touch. But there was something there, something that made that place seem safer than any walled city. That's when I saw the angels. They were positioned along the paths, tall, steady, like guardians. They didn't have wings like the images we see in paintings. They were like silent warriors, their eyes alert, watching every move of those who passed by. And despite the visible danger, I realized that no one was hurt. It was as if every step was guided by invisible hands. I watched those people climbing with difficulty, some carrying children in their arms, others helping the elderly, but none of them seemed to complain. What struck me was their gaze. They didn't look back. It was as if they knew any hesitation could be fatal. A man slipped on a loose stone and almost fell. But one of the angels caught him before his body hit the ground. I saw it happening as if I were right there, very close. And it was at that moment that I realized that all of this wasn't a symbolic vision, it was real, very real. It was like if God were showing me what will happen to those who remain faithful when persecution comes. And it wasn't just any persecution. I saw dark, indistinct, faceless shadows behind them, but they emitted an almost paralyzing fear. Still, the faithful continued, because those who have faith, even in fear, continue. It was then that everything changed again, but this time it wasn't like before. The atmosphere around me began to shine in a way I had never seen on Earth. It wasn't light from a light bulb, nor from the sun, nor from fire. It was a light that seemed to come from within things. Everything around me was filled with that light, and suddenly I saw something that took my breath away. A city, but not just any city. It descended from heaven like a bride, as it is written in the scriptures, but it wasn't a poetic image. I saw that happening. The city descended slowly, majestically, and there was no shadow in it. The streets seemed made of glass, but they didn't break. The gates were gigantic, with details my mind could barely process. And in the midst of it all, I felt his presence again, stronger, more alive, and I heard clearly, not with my ears, but with my heart. These are the temporary refuges, but this is the eternal home of those who obey me. The moment he said that, I felt something inside me that can't be explained. It wasn't just emotion. It was as if everything I'd lived, everything I'd believed, everything I'd endured had led to this. A feeling that I was finally understanding the why of faith. Why do we pray? Why do we forgive? Why do we choose the narrow path when the easiest thing would be to remain silent or accommodate? The New Jerusalem wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. I felt the stones sing, the wind speak, and time that didn't exist as we know it. There was no pain, no fear, no tiredness, and there was a peace that didn't come from outside, but it was born within, a peace so strong it made me cry again. But this time it wasn't tears of pain, it was as if my soul was home for the first time, as if I had arrived at the place it should never have left. But then everything began to disappear. It wasn't all at once. It was slow, like a mist that covers everything. I began to feel my body again, that weight of the world, that limitation of being flesh, and I confess it scared me. I didn't want to go back, I didn't want to leave that place, but at the same time I knew I still had something to do. It was as if he was saying, without saying it, that he needed to tell it, that what he had seen wasn't just for me, it was to warn me. Warn that the days are coming, that the refuges are being shown, that it is necessary to be ready, spiritually ready, because when it comes there won't be time to run, to prepare, to look for one last chance. Either you live in obedience or it will be too late. And then it was as if someone pulled an invisible thread and everything went black. When I opened my eyes, everything was blurry. The hospital lights blinded me for a few seconds, and the sound slowly returned, as if I were underwater and suddenly broke the surface. There were voices, running footsteps, someone saying, "He's back." And then I felt my chest burning as if I'd been hit hard. Later I learned they had used the defibrillator. They had declared me dead for more than 8 minutes, but the truth is, I wasn't dead. I was more alive than ever. I remember slowly turning my face and seeing a nurse with wide eyes staring at me as if he'd seen a ghost. I think he saw it in a way, because something in me already it wasn't the same. I looked at the white ceiling of that room and felt a mixture of nostalgia and mission. Nostalgia for that place I can't explain, and the mission to tell what I saw, even knowing many wouldn't believe it. I stayed in the hospital for 2 more days. I didn't say anything in the first moments, not to the doctors, not to my daughter, not to the pastor who came to visit me. I just cried, not out of sadness, but from a kind of spiritual shock. You know when something is so big that you don't even know where to begin to explain it? I kept remembering those people in Petra, the woman kneeling in the Negev, the angels on the paths of Moab, and the city descending from heaven. And I wondered, why me? Why did I see this? And more importantly, what do I do with this now? I'm not a preacher, I was never a missionary. I'm just a woman who spent her life trying to believe in silence, doing what she could. But in that hospital room, with the smell of alcohol and machines beeping all around, I realized I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. The first person I spoke to was my granddaughter. She's in her 20s. She's a sweet girl, but she lives connected in this fast-paced world of social media, cell phones, university, and busy life. She came to visit me the next day, and when she hugged me, I couldn't hold back. I started to cry softly, holding her hand tightly. I said, "Daughter, I saw it. I saw with my own eyes what is coming." She thought I was confused by the medication. She tried to calm me down, but then I looked her deep in the eyes and said, "You need to be prepared. When things start happening, you'll remember Grandma telling you this here." And then I began to tell you little by little, without embellishment, just recounting what I saw. I saw the places God prepared. I saw people running with faith. I saw a time when having money, followers, or a diploma will mean nothing. Only one thing will matter, whether you're walking with Him or not. In the days that followed, I tried to write it all down in my shaky handwriting on notebook paper, trying to remember every detail, because the memory of that experience wasn't like a dream that fades away. It was as if it had been etched inside me, line by line, every face, every sensation, every silent word. To this day, I sometimes wake up with the image of the city shining in my mind. It won't go away, and I don't want it to go away either. I feel it's my responsibility to remember and repeat how many times it is necessary, not to impress or seem more spiritual, but so that no one would say they weren't warned. Because I felt this in the depths of my soul. Time is running out. The warning was clear. God's mercy is still extended, but not for long. He has already shown the places. He has already left everything ready. All that remains is for us to decide whether we will obey now or run when it's too late. After I returned home, things began to change without me realizing it. Television no longer held my attention as much. The news, soap operas, those distractions that used to fill my time, everything seemed small. Now I began to spend more time in silence, praying, reading the Word more seriously. And it wasn't out of fear, it was out of conscience, as if my spirit I was on alert. I remember one specific night. I was alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea in my hand, and suddenly I found myself staring out the windows, my heart heavy. A thought came to me. How many are distracted while the sky is already moving? That hurt me because I knew what I had seen. I knew that shelters exist, that the desert isn't just symbolic, that Petra isn't just a tourist ruin. I saw God there. I saw His provision, I saw His hand leading simple people like you and me. And now I had to live in a way that honored that. It wasn't easy telling people. Some listened to me with respect, others looked at me with that air of I'm too old, I'm already delirious. But you know, I learned that it doesn't matter whether they believe or not. My role is to speak, to record it, to ensure that if one day someone remembers this testimony, they can understand what God was showing them. I didn't have grandiose visions of angels speaking loudly, or of horses of fire. What I had was an experience of obedience being clearly revealed. True refuges set apart by Him, protected by Him, for times of real persecution. And that made me understand that living a comfortable faith is perhaps the greatest danger today. Because those who don't hear God's voice in times of calm will hardly recognize it in the midst of chaos. A few days later, I received a visit from the pastor of my church. He already knew what had happened. My daughter had told him about it. When he came into the living room and saw me sitting with the Bible in my lap, he didn't say anything for a while. He sat in the chair across from me and just looked at me. I sensed he was trying to understand how to approach the subject. So I was direct. I said, "Pastor, I saw it, and I can't keep quiet any longer." And there, in that simple room with antique furniture and the afternoon light entering through the thin curtain, I told him everything, detail by detail. He remained silent for long minutes after I finished. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Sister Isabel, I believe you." Those 3 words broke me inside. I cried because it was as if, even speaking, I was still carrying the weight of a secret. And for the first time, I felt that someone had understood, not with their mind, but with their spirit. We prayed together that afternoon, and he said something I never forgot. "What you saw is a reminder, and perhaps God showed it to a person like you precisely because the world despises the simple." That resonated with me for days. I was always just a housewife. I took care of my children, then my grandchildren. I never preached in a pulpit, never took a theology course. But now, at 78 years old, I was faced with a truth that pierced me like a lance. God isn't looking for titles or fame, He's looking for attentive ears and obedient hearts. And that's what I saw in the people in the vision, simple but determined people. People who didn't need a sign because they were already walking by faith. And perhaps that's why He's raising up the elderly, children, and all kinds of people to spread this same message. Obey now. Don't wait for the world to fall apart to recognize the voice calling you. After that day with the pastor, I began receiving calls and messages from people who heard about my experience. Some wanted to listen, others were just curious. There were even people who mocked me, calling me a fanatic. But there were also those who sought me out in tears, saying that it had been a long time since they had felt anything from God, and that upon hearing my story, something was sparked again inside their hearts. A woman from my neighborhood, who rarely went to church, told me with tears in her eyes, "Doña Isabel, I was always afraid of the end, but the way you speak makes it seem like God is still giving us a chance." And that's exactly it. It's not a message of panic, it's one of mercy. What came was the end, it was the warning before the end. God is still calling us. And anyone with sensitivity will realize that the heavens are moving, not out of fury, but out of compassion. What struck me most was realizing that the refuges I saw, Petra, the Negev, the mountains, were not just geographical places. They were also spiritual places. Each one of them represented a way of life. Petra was like a hiding place carved by obedience. The Negev was a school of total dependence, and the paths of Transjordan were the narrow path that demands faith to continue even without seeing the end. But the New Jerusalem, to that city, that was the final destination. And knowing that it exists, that it is prepared, gives me the strength to continue. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, and everything comes back to me so clearly it seems I'm still there. During those hours, I get up slowly, sit on the edge of the bed, and begin to pray. I no longer ask for anything, I only give thanks because, even though I didn't deserve it, I was chosen to see that. And now I know my duty is to shout while there's still time. There was a night when I was very thoughtful. I sat on the porch of my house, covered with my shawl, looking up at the sky. The silence of the early morning always helped me organize my thoughts. I stayed there remembering the paths, the brilliance of the celestial city, the woman kneeling in the desert, and suddenly anguish took hold of me because I understood that while many are distracted, discussing politics, television series, or how to make easy money, God is calling His own, and few are listening. I don't say this to put myself above anyone. God knows I'm fallible, full of flaws, but what I experienced was too real to keep to myself. And more than that, it made me realize that this time of preparation we hear so much about began long ago. There won't be a trumpet blast to warn us. It will be like a strong wind that comes suddenly, and only those who are steadfast will remain standing. And what scares me most is that many sincere believers are tired of praying, of waiting, of fighting discouragement. And I understand. Before all this, I was already comfortable. I went to church, read the Bible here and there, but with that fire gone, it was as if my faith was on autopilot. But after the it changed. Now I pray urgently. Every time I bend my knees, I feel as if I were stepping back onto those lands I saw, as if I were in Petra crying out to be saved, or in the Negev asking for spiritual provision, or on those narrow paths asking for the courage to continue even without understanding everything. My prayer has changed. It's no longer for healing or solutions to earthly problems. Now it's only for discernment. Discernment to hear His voice and not get lost in the noise of the world. After I began to share my experience, I noticed something strange. Some people began to distance themselves from me, even family members. Some consider me exaggerated, others say I'm becoming too mystical. But I don't hold a grudge. I know it's hard to believe when you haven't experienced something like this. Sometimes even I wonder if it really happened, but then I close my eyes and everything returns. The images, the sensations, the gaze of that being of light. There's no way to doubt it. I know what I saw, and as much as it hurts that they don't believe me, I understood that this is also part of the mission. To speak even when no one wants to hear, to warn even when they mock. Jesus was also rejected, and yet He didn't stop. That's why I won't stop. Even if my knees hurt, even if my voice trembles, I will continue telling the tale until the last day of my life, if necessary. The other day, a young woman from church came to find me after the service. She told me she was going through a crisis of faith, even thinking of abandoning everything. Crying, she asked me, "Doña Isabel, how do you know all this is true? That it wasn't just something in your mind?" I took a deep breath, took her hands, and answered, "Because after you see it with the eyes of your soul, you can never be the same again. And that's it. It's not about proving anything to anyone. It's about what changed inside here, about how that vision gave me a new awareness. The New Jerusalem exists, Petra exists, the Negev exists. And most importantly, God is calling us now. He doesn't want us to rush when it's too late. He wants us to wake up now before the world begins to fall apart. Sometimes I think that experience wasn't just for me, but for an entire generation. A distracted, overburdened generation, with their hearts divided between God and the system of this world. Many people are trying to reconcile faith with comfort, but what I saw showed me that it won't be possible to walk both paths at the same time. When the tribulation truly begins, And I'm not talking about theories, but about real persecution, social, spiritual, even physical. Only those who are hidden in God will endure. Those places I was shown had no luxuries, no internet, no distractions. They had silence, prayer, renunciation, and at the same time strength, a strength that was not human. It was as if the Holy Spirit was there in every stone, in every breath of wind. And that made me understand that the time to decide is not when the world is on fire. That hour, in the silence, in the room, in sincere prayer. One night I had a dream. A few weeks had passed since I left the hospital. In the dream, I was back in the desert, but this time there was no one by my side. I was alone. The sky was dark, and I walked slowly, feeling afraid. Suddenly, I heard a loud sound like thunder. I looked up and saw a light coming from the sky, but different from the one I had seen in the experience. It was as if someone was turning on a lighthouse in the darkness. And I heard very quietly, as if it were inside me. "Speak again." They're still not listening. I woke up in a cold sweat with my heart pounding, and from then on, I decided I wouldn't keep quiet anymore. No matter who laughs, who walks away, who doubts, I saw, I heard. And even if I live only a few more years, I will speak until my last breath. There are days when I find myself standing staring into space, as if waiting to hear that voice again. Not because I'm confused, but because my spirit feels nostalgic for that place, for the peace I never found here. And then I remember the phrase he said to me, "These are temporary refuges, but this is the eternal home of those who obey me." That phrase resonates in me like a truth that no one can take away from me, because since that day, everything I do is with eternity in mind. When I speak to someone, when I pray, even when I remain silent, everything carries the weight of knowing that I saw with my own eyes that what may have only heard about. I'm not better for it, quite the opposite. I feel small, sometimes even unworthy, but for some reason he chose me, and I don't want to waste that. Some people ask me if I wasn't afraid of dying, and the answer is yes. I was very afraid of death before this experience, but not today, because I know that what comes next is infinitely more real than all this. Time passes, health weakens, friends leave, loneliness strikes, but none of it affects me like it did before. Because now I saw the end that is not the end, I saw the continuation. And more than that, I saw that while the world runs in search of security in money, in careers, in recognition, the true refuges are being prepared in silence, far from the spotlight. God didn't hide Petra by chance, he set her aside, he protected her, and he is doing that again today in the hearts that are still listening to his voice. The question is, how many still listen? I don't know why that happened to me. I don't know why that day, at that hour, in that bed, my heart stopped and my soul was taken to that place. I also don't know why I came back. I've thought about it a lot. Maybe it would have been easier to stay there. There was no pain, no memories, no nostalgia, only peace. But for some reason, he brought me back, and since then, I've carried this weight, which is not a burden, but a responsibility. The responsibility to tell, to warn, to alert those who still believe they have time, that they can wait a little longer to truly surrender, to obey, to align their lives with God's will. I saw it. I was there, not by merit, but by grace. And today, even without understanding everything, I accept it. I accept that my mission here is not yet over. And the strangest thing of all is that after that day, I never had another vision, no dream, no apparition, nothing. It was as if everything had happened in a single instant, and then silence. But a silence that speaks, that teaches, that weighs. And sometimes when I'm alone, it seems like all of that was a lifetime lived in 8 minutes. 8 minutes out of my body that completely changed all the years I have left here inside it. I don't know how much time I have left, but what I know is that as long as I breathe, I will continue to repeat it. He showed me the refuges are real and the time is closer than we imagine. May God give you ears to hear before the sound is silenced forever. Isabel's story reminds us that God still speaks, still reveals, and continues to prepare refuges for those who truly obey Him. Even in the face of death, she was chosen to see what many never imagined, and she returned with a clear warning. The time is near, and only those who are spiritually prepared will endure it. Her testimony is beyond moving. It's an urgent invitation to a living faith, sincere prayer, and immediate obedience. Do you believe God still reveals things like this? Have you experienced something similar, or do you know someone who has had a supernatural experience like this? Tell us here in the comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave your like to continue receiving stories that touch the heart and awaken the soul. If you like this type of content and want to help keep this mission alive, become a member of the channel by clicking the join button. It's simple, fast, and makes all the difference. And don't leave. The next